So we're a family farming company. We're farming 590 hectares. We're about 2 miles north of Gloucester, farming alongside the River Severn and the River Leaden. We've got about 400 hectares of arable land, and the rest is woodland and grassland. Soil types seriously vary. We've got really heavy clays to some more silty clay loams. I have everything measured. That helps us produce variable seed rate maps or variable input maps depending on the soil type. The best soil is nearest the river, and I'm guessing that's from where soil's deposited over generations of floods. We've probably got about 150 hectares of arable floodplain, and over the last 10 years that's sort of decreased from arable to grassland, so we've got about 70% of arable and 30% grassland. With our arable floodplain, we run a spring arable rotation mainly. Well, it was quite wide, but we're having issues with some unreliable crops, so we were planting spring wheat, spring barley, peas, linseed and canary grass, but some of those crops we've started to have issues with weed burdens and the gross margins haven't looked great. If we have too many failed crops on an arable floodplain field, we're looking at other options, so whether we can put them into a stewardship scheme and revert them back to grass. We have issues with wild oats from spring planting year on year, lots of cereals and not a lot of chemistry to act against it. Also, we're doing a lot of direct drilling, especially in the floodplain. So that's one reason why the wild oats is an issue, because when we're trying to avoid ploughing as much as possible. We try and direct drill as much as we can and avoid ploughing, and that's really helped. I've noticed in the last 2 or 3 years since we've been doing it an improvement in soil structure and water holding capacity. I'm involved with the HDB benchmarking our arable crops, and that's really what's led me to noticing that some of our crops, spring crops, aren't producing very good gross margins, and then looking at it more specifically field by field. Year on year, if I find an issue with a field, for example, these fields, last year they were arable. However, we've had a number of years where we've not been able to plant them just due to how wet the fields are. We've decided to put this block into grass and aim for improved habitat for wildlife. The main reason being, if we wanted to plant it for arable, we were having to physically drain it, or it was flooding in spring. We've introduced some infrastructure, so there's like a riverside bank alongside the River Leaden, 2 culverts that sort of go under the bank and into the river. What we've done is put outlet flaps that you can wind open or close. That will then help control the water. So at the moment, when we've got lots of water like we have now, those flaps will be fully open. So we do a bit of hay, but we largely graze any grass on the farm. It's all fairly sort of low quality grass. We've got some cattle and sheep, so we've got about 60 cattle, Herefordshire cattle, and about 100 sheep. We sort of rotate these across the farm to help sort of manage our fields that we don't no longer use for arable. Our livestock is also integrated into our arable system, so naturally a lot of our grassland is in the floodplain. We have very little grassland out of the floodplain, so if we've got a winter arable block that is just sitting bare, we won't let it sit bare. We'll plant a cover crop so that it helps provide some forage for our we graze our sheep and cattle across it through the winter to give them something to go at, because as you can see, some of this grassland is a bit wet through the winter. By grazing cover crops, it helps us keep the stock out longer, and it's this very extensive way of grazing them, and we don't have to buy any. We buy very, very little forage in, so it's sort of all a sort of self-contained system, or as large as possible. We mainly use FWAG for advice and guidance on stewardship options and advice for some of our floodplain work. But otherwise, I also use. My granddad has a lot of information, and I've only been farming 10 years. Previous family members have been farming the land a lot longer, so I use them for advice. I'm not 100% sure what the future of the farm will look like. We are currently in talks about being part of the landscape recovery pilot scheme, which is going to be called Eelscapes, where we're looking at returning the land to what it originally was, but that's in the feasibility stage, so that could take quite a large proportion of our floodplain out of production. So we've a number of floodplains, this one in particular, where we're putting some higher tier scheme options. We're sort of trying to have a range of habitat for wildlife, so we'll have 2 fields of grassland, followed by one in the middle that will remain sort of more natural regrowth. Reason being, I've always noticed that the wildlife love the areas that just have a natural regrowth. They just love the sort of soil structure and love grazing in the sort of softer soil. So that's one of the main reasons we've sort of this year left one field not as grass, but left it with regrowth, and the regrowth produces seeds, they fall, leaves cover, and I've sort of cut areas of cover so that they've got a range of options, either cover or no cover, and they seem to really enjoy it.